My name is Dana Whitlow, and last year I served my father the exact jam he once called a waste of shelf space, in front of a food critic from Carolina Table Quarterly. The look on his face when they called it the best artisanal spread in the state. Let's just say, sweet didn't even begin to cover it. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever been dismissed by your own family, you'll understand why this story still stings. Now let me take you back to the kitchen where it all began. It was 8:43 a.m. in our family's jam factory in Asheville, North Carolina, and the walls still smelled like simmered fruit and old sugar. The back windows fogged from steam, the buzzing fluorescent lights catching the edges of syrup stains on the linoleum. I stood behind the work table, heart thudding in my ears, holding a small mason jar like it was a bomb about to detonate. Because in this house, innovation wasn't just discouraged. It was practically outlawed. This, I said, unscrewing the lid and sliding the jar across the table to my dad, is hibiscus cherry. I let the petals steep for 24 hours. There's a hit of lemon peel and a dash of white pepper at the end. Try it. Everett Whitlow, my father, and the man who'd built this place brick by sticky brick, didn't even glance down. He just snorted, loud and dismissive, as he wiped his hands on a flour-speckled apron. Enough with your ridiculous experiments, Dana. We're running a business, not a carnival. The words hit like boiling syrup on bare skin. I'm not playing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not just jam, it's innovation. We can't survive on nostalgia forever. Ashley, my younger sister, giggled. Of course she did. She was still in her flour-dusted hoodie, her long blonde hair looped up in a messy bun that somehow still looked Instagram-ready. Oh my God, she said through her laugh. Did you say that with a straight face? Our mom, Marlene, didn't say a word. She just kept wiping the edge of a spotless counter with a rag that already looked worn from nerves. Everett finally picked up the jar, squinted at the contents like I'd poisoned it, and gave the tiniest sniff. White pepper, he muttered like a curse. Then louder, you're not here to play chef. Stick to what works. The blackberry lavender's already in production. No one's asking for cherry hibiscus whatever. But he slapped the lid back on and pushed the jar toward me, not even tasting it. You want to play with flavors, do it at home, not in my kitchen. I felt heat rise in my throat, anger, humiliation, that familiar crawl of shame I'd grown used to every time he cut me down in front of others. Only this time it wasn't just me and him. Ashley was watching, practically smirking. Mom was looking anywhere but at me, so I swallowed it, all of it. And for a second I felt 17 again. That same rush of helplessness from the time he made me scrap my first small batch peach time jam because time doesn't belong in fruit. Like always, he wanted control, and anything that didn't fit into his vision of Whitlow Jam & Co. got tossed. Got it, I said softly. Stick to what works, Ashley shrugged. Good call. The worst part wasn't even what they said. It was how easily they dismissed me like this was routine, like I didn't matter. Like I was invisible in a place I helped build with my own two hands. I picked up the jar, heart thrumming in humiliation, and walked to the back pantry, letting the door swing shut behind me. But something in me had shifted. I'd never said it out loud, not even to Micah, my husband. But that morning, holding that jar like it was my lifeline, I made a silent promise. If no one else would taste it, I'd find someone who would. After the outburst in the kitchen, I slipped into the back office. The smallest room in the building, tucked between the cold storage and the freight door, where the air always smelled faintly of old apples and printer ink. I shut the door quietly behind me and leaned against it, letting the silence settle around me like a second skin. The hum of the mini fridge was the only sound for a moment. Then came the quiet squeak of the old ceiling fan. I sat down at the weather-worn desk, the corners of the ledger curling like they'd been left out in the rain, and stared at the open spreadsheet in front of me. Numbers, dates, batches, my jam fingerprint, but all I could hear in my head was Ashley laughing. Did you say that with a straight face? I closed my eyes, exhaled, and whispered, maybe I'm the only one who cares anymore. I didn't mean just about the jam. The labels were still stacked beside me, uneven piles from decades past. Whitlow Jam & Co. ESD. 1986. Back when my grandfather still helped stir the pots with a wooden spoon so long it had its own hook above the stove. I used to believe we were carrying on something beautiful. Now I just felt carried, like baggage. Through the small office window, I could see them in the main kitchen. My dad was shouting something about boiling times while Ashley leaned lazily against a counter, texting with one hand and half listening. Mom was scraping hardened jelly off a pan with that same tired determination she brought to everything, quiet, mechanical, enduring. None of them looked toward the office. None of them ever did. I turned back to the ledger, blinking against the tears that had started to rise, uninvited. It wasn't just the dismissal that stung. It was the speed of it. How quickly my dad had thrown the jar back at me. How easily Ashley had laughed. How Mom, my mother, hadn't said a single word. "They don't see me," I murmured to the fluorescent light above. I clicked open the inventory file and got to work. It was easier than feeling. I typed batch numbers, tallied crate counts, double-checked sugar deliveries against invoices. I told myself I was just helping. That staying late meant things ran smoother. That taking this on alone was just part of being responsible. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was trying to make myself useful enough to be valued. I worked until the rest of the kitchen went dark. I could hear the laughter as they left, Ashley's high giggle, Everett's deep chuckle, the quiet clink of keys as they locked up front. No one checked the office. No one asked if I was still there. I sat with that for a while. The jam jar, my jam jar, was still beside me on the desk, unopened since this morning. I picked it up and held it to the light. The deep cherry hue glowed in the dusty beam from the overhead lamp. I twisted the lid off again and let the scent drift up, sweet, bright, floral with a whisper of lemon. It was beautiful, and no one cared. For a long moment I thought about leaving it right there, just leaving everything. But then I stood, tucked the jar into my bag, and turned off the light. If no one else would see me here, maybe it was time to be seen somewhere else. The next morning began the way most did. Coffee brewed too weak, toast a minute too dark, and Ashley humming through her makeup routine like we didn't share a wall. I came downstairs in jeans and a sweatshirt, already dreading another long day at the factory, but nothing prepared me for the ambush that waited in the dining room. Everett, still in his fleece vest and muddy boots from feeding the chickens, stood at the head of the table like he was about to deliver a sermon. "We're making some changes," he said, stabbing a fork into his eggs. "Starting today, Ashley's taking over as production manager." My spoon paused midair in my oatmeal. Ashley, who was scrolling Instagram on her phone with chipped glitter polish, didn't even look up. "She's what?" Everett didn't even blink. "She's got good instincts and we need fresh energy on the floor." Fresh energy. She'd barely survived her senior year and still called me to ask how to print PDFs. "You can't be serious," I said, lowering my spoon slowly. "She's 18, she doesn't even know how the inventory system works." Everett shrugged. "Then teach her if you care that much." Ashley finally looked up, blinking like someone had just complimented her earrings. "I mean, I did make a TikTok about the holiday packs. It got almost 800 likes. I stared at her. "You tagged it as organic maple butter." "We don't even make maple butter," she pouted. "Details." Mom sipped her coffee without meeting my eyes. I tried again, more measured. "Dad, I've been managing the floor for 5 years. I know the supply chain, the safety protocols, the local accounts. Why wouldn't you ask me before making this decision?" He finally looked at me briefly, and that's when it hit me. He already had made the decision. It wasn't a discussion, it was a decree. "It's not personal, Dana," he said, in the same tone he used to scold overripe strawberries. "But you've been scattered lately. With your side hobbies, we need someone who's focused." My face flushed. "You mean the recipe I spent weeks developing, the one you wouldn't even taste?" Ashley twirled her spoon like a baton. "Maybe if you stopped trying to turn jam into a science fair, Dad wouldn't be so dismissive." I gripped the edge of the table, pulse pounding. "So let me get this straight. I'm being replaced by someone who can't operate a scale, who thinks fruit expiration dates are suggestions, and I'm expected to train her to do the job I've already been doing for what? Less pay?" Everett's tone turned cold. "She's family. We invest in family." "So am I said quietly. No one answered. Ashley grinned and bit into a muffin she hadn't baked. And just like that, the conversation ended. My father stood and patted her shoulder like he was knighting her, and they both headed toward the door, already talking about her leadership training like it was real. I sat in silence as their voices trailed down the porch steps. My oatmeal had gone cold. My appetite was gone anyway. Mom started collecting the dishes, still without a word. "Do you agree with this?" I asked. She paused, stacking the mugs. "Your sister's young, she needs some direction." I stared at her. And I don't. She finally looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something, regret, maybe, or guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You're stronger, she said softly, then turned back to the sink. That was supposed to comfort me. It didn't. That afternoon, Ashley stood next to me at the factory's main computer, slowly pecking at the keyboard like she'd never seen one before. How do I open the inventory file again? She asked, blowing a bubble with her gum. And what's the login? I inhaled through my nose. Why don't you write this down? She clicked her tongue. I'll remember. She wouldn't, but I showed her anyway. I walked her through it. I did the job, like always. The resentment settled deeper, like the thick sugar we poured into the kettles each morning, slow, sticky, impossible to undo once it crystallized. I was being erased in my own home, dismantled by the people I'd given everything to, but they weren't paying attention, which meant, finally, I could start thinking about my next move. That evening, I sat on the porch steps with my knees pulled to my chest, a mug of lukewarm tea in my hands and my head full of fog. The sun was sinking behind the hills, casting the yard in that hazy golden hour light I used to love. Now it felt like the end of something. Micah came out quietly, folding himself beside me with the kind of gentleness that didn't announce itself. He handed me a slice of buttered cornbread and didn't ask why I hadn't come inside for dinner. I take it the promotion didn't come your way, he asked. I gave a hollow laugh. Ashley's now production manager, his eyebrows lifted. Did she get a degree overnight? She can't even log into the inventory software. I had to show her where the icon was, and apparently I'm expected to train her for less money. Micah shook his head slowly. Wow, that's impressive, even for Everett. I looked down at the chipped edge of my mug, fingers tightening around it. It's like they don't even try to pretend anymore. I brought them a recipe that could have taken us into a new market. Something creative, vibrant, special. He wouldn't even taste it. Micah was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know what your problem is." "Oh, please enlighten me," I muttered. "You're trying to build a cathedral inside a barn." I blinked. "Come again," he set his tea on the step. "You're pouring your whole heart, your creativity, your precision, your joy into a place that stopped seeing you years ago. They want a jam machine, you want a canvas." I stared at him. "You sound like a fortune cookie." Micah grinned. "A wise cookie." I snorted, but it softened something in me. I rested my chin on my knees and murmured, "What am I even doing, Micah? Why do I stay?" "Because you love it," he said simply. "Not just the jam, the craft, the chemistry, the risk. The way your face lights up when you get a flavor just right. But maybe it's time you stop giving that to people who treat it like filler." The cicadas hummed around us. He nudged my knee. "So why not just make the jam here?" I blinked. "What, here?" he repeated. "Small batches, your recipe, our kitchen, we've got the space, the equipment, you've got the skill, I've got a clean apron with your name on it." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's crazy." "Is it?" he said, pulling out his phone. "Because I made a few calls. Turns out there are 5 small shops within 30 miles that stock local preserves. One of them just lost their vendor." He held out his screen to show me a list of names: Rusty Creek Farm Stand, Bee Hollow Mercantile, Harvest Pantry, and I felt my breath hitch. "I talked to the one in Waynesville," he added. "The owner, Nancy, real sharp, told her about your cherry hibiscus. Her exact words were, 'Sounds like something I'd put right by the register.'" I stared at the screen, then at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he said. "All we'd need is a few test jars, some labels, a little courage, the rest we figure out." I shook my head slowly, trying not to let the hope creep in. "Micah, this isn't just some fun side project, it's work, it's late nights, it's money we don't have." "I've seen what your work looks like," he said. "And I'd rather bet on your crazy than their tradition any day." Something twisted in my chest. "Because I wanted it. I wanted it so badly it scared me." "What if it flops?" I asked softly. Micah shrugged. "Then it flops, but at least it's ours." The last bit of light slipped behind the trees. I felt the night press in around us. And something in me, tired, bruised, but still burning, whispered, maybe this is the way out, not a fight, not a confrontation, but a quiet, powerful shift. I leaned my head against Micah's shoulder, my voice barely a breath. "Let's make some damn jam." The kitchen felt different that night. It wasn't the stove or the worn tile floor or the stack of mason jars crowding the counter. It was the shift in energy, in purpose. The air smelled like cherries, citrus peel, and something daring, something untested. I rolled up my sleeves and tied my hair into a knot, glancing at Micah across the stove. He was measuring sugar like a surgeon, careful, deliberate, no jokes for once. Even the radio was low, humming an old jazz tune that made everything feel like a slow-motion dream. We didn't speak at first. There was just the soft stir of the wooden spoon moving through the bubbling mixture, the occasional tap of metal against glass, and the rhythm of two people choosing something together. Quietly, boldly, Micah handed me the lemon zest without a word. I sprinkled it in like confetti over the pot, watching as the ribbons disappeared into deep red. "You nervous?" he asked finally, glancing over at me. "Numb," I said, "but the good kind, like just before a roller coaster drops." He smiled. "We should have started here all along." "Started where?" I asked, tasting the spoon. "Here, at the table we built, not the one that always pulled your chair away." That one hit me, deep. I let the taste settle on my tongue. Sweet at first, then floral with that tiny zap of pepper at the very end. My eyes widened. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Micah." He raised a brow. "That bad?" "No." I shook my head slowly, tasting again. "Micah, this is it." He laughed, boyish and light. "You sure?" I held the spoon out to him. "Taste it." He leaned in and took the tiniest sample, closing his eyes like it was wine. After a second, his eyebrows lifted. "Okay, that's not just jam, that's a moment in a jar." A thrill ran through me. This wasn't flattery. Micah didn't know how to fake a reaction like that. We both looked at the pot, still simmering gently, and I couldn't help but smile. "It's weird," I said quietly. "I've made hundreds of batches, tried dozens of recipes, but none of them felt like this." "Maybe because this is the first time no one else is steering the spoon," he said. I leaned against the counter, watching the light flicker against the glass jars we'd washed and sterilized earlier. They stood ready, empty, waiting. "Okay," I said, exhaling. "Let's jar it." We moved in sync. I ladled while he sealed. We wiped the edges, lined them up like soldiers, and let them cool on the wire rack we borrowed from my old baking days. There were only 12 jars. 12 little vessels of defiance, of hope, of my voice. Micah slid a blank label across the table toward me. "What do we call it?" I hesitated. It didn't feel right to give it a name tied to the factory, or the family, or even our last name. I thought of something lighter, something fragile, something brave. "Sparrowberry," I said after a beat. Micah looked at me. "Sparrow." "Yeah." I traced the edge of a jar with my finger. "They're small, overlooked, but they show up anyway, and they sing." He nodded slowly, a smile tugging at his mouth. "Sparrowberry it is." That night, we labeled each jar by hand. My handwriting wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As the last label curled onto the glass, I looked at the row and felt something swell inside me. Not pride, not yet, but possibility. Micah poured us 2 small spoons of the jam, clinked his against mine like a toast, and said, "To the flops that don't flop." I grinned. "And to the jars that get seen." Outside, the night was deep and silent. Inside, something had begun. The next afternoon, we pulled up in front of the Honey Barrel Farm shop in Waynesville, and I swear I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The shop sat nestled between 2 tall rows of sunflowers, its wooden sign swinging gently in the breeze, and a chalkboard out front read, "Try local, taste bold." I stared at that line longer than I meant to. Micah parked, looked over at me. "You breathing?" I forced a smile. "Barely." We had packed the 12 jars of sparrowberry jam in a recycled wooden fruit crate, each wrapped in tissue paper with a label handwritten the night before. It didn't look like much, not compared to the polished displays I'd helped put together for years at Whitlow Jam & Co., but this crate, this was mine. Micah carried it like a treasure chest as we stepped inside. The store smelled like cinnamon and pine, with shelves of small-batch honey, herbal teas, soaps shaped like sheep, and candles with names like Mountain Mist and Barnwood and Fig. Behind the counter stood a woman with short silver hair, turquoise glasses, and a turquoise stone necklace to match. She looked up and smiled before we even spoke. "You must be the jam people," she said, pulling her readers onto her nose. Micah grinned and nudged me forward. "She's the jam genius, I'm just her driver." I stepped up, nerves bubbling higher than anything we'd cooked on the stove. "I'm Dana. This is a small batch cherry, hibiscus, lemon peel, and a little white pepper. We thought maybe you'd want to try it." Nancy, her name etched into a wooden name tag, reached for a spoon without hesitation. "You're not the first folks to bring me a jar," she said as she twisted off the lid, "but you're the first to say it like you believe in it." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. She dipped the spoon into the jar and took a small taste, then another, then she blinked. "That's got kick," she said, nodding. And layers. First sweet, then bright, and that whisper of heat at the end. I like food that knows who it is. I stared at her, waiting for the but. She set the spoon down and pushed her glasses higher. How many you got? Just a dozen for now, I said quickly. We're just starting small, very small. Nancy opened the cash register. Leave me the whole crate. My mouth parted. Wait, you mean you want to sell them? I mean I want to buy them, she said with a smile. I don't do consignment. I pay my vendors like they're partners, not a risk I didn't choose. How much per jar? Micah, bless him, answered because I couldn't. She scribbled a receipt on a torn piece of stationery and slipped it into my hand, along with a folded $20 bill. And that's for gas money, she added. Now go make more. Let me know when you have another batch. I don't remember what I said next. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. But I remember stepping out into the sun with Micah, still holding that receipt like it might blow away if I blinked. I looked down at the note scrawled in looping script. Let me know when you have more. I read it 3 times. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel invisible. Micah slid his arm around my waist and whispered, Told you. One of them would like crazy. I didn't answer. I just smiled, held that note tighter, and let the disbelief shift slowly, gently into something else, hope. By the end of the week, I'd learned that chasing a dream and clocking in for someone else's can't coexist forever, not without something giving way. Unfortunately, that something was me. By day, I was still Dana Whitlow, dutiful daughter, unpaid supervisor, trainer of a sister who couldn't find the submit button on a form. By night, I was Sparrowberry's entire team, measuring, boiling, pouring, labeling, jars lined up on every flat surface in our farmhouse kitchen, the windows fogged with sweet steam until nearly midnight. And I was so tired, I started forgetting my own name when I answered the factory phone. Whitlow Jam, this is Dana. Yes, sorry. I hadn't had more than 4 hours of sleep in a week. But quitting wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until I knew the sales weren't a fluke. Not until Sparrowberry could hold its own. So I kept showing up. And that morning, I walked into the main office to find Ashley sitting at her desk, legs crossed on top of a shipping box, scrolling TikTok and eating trail mix like she was on a very casual lunch break. At 9:07 a.m. Ashley, I said carefully, setting down a stack of invoices, did you log the fruit shipment yesterday? She squinted like I was speaking another language. What shipment? The one that came at 3 p.m. from Greenville Produce, 20 flats of strawberries, 6 crates of lemons. Oh, she blinked. I think I signed for it, I don't know, the guy had a beard. I turned to the monitor on her desk. Blank screen, spreadsheet still unopened. No entry made. Ashley, that was a $1,200 delivery. If it's not logged, we can't reconcile the books, and Dad's already on me about cost overruns. She shrugged, popping another almond into her mouth. Sorry, I'm just not a tech person. I stared at her. It's a spreadsheet, you double-click it and type the numbers. Well, it's not intuitive, she mumbled. Besides, didn't you say you'd show me again? I showed you 4 times, I said, trying not to sound as tired as I felt. She smiled lazily. Then once more won't kill you. I wanted to scream, or throw the entire monitor out the window, but I didn't. I pulled out the chair, sat down and did it myself. Entered every crate, matched the receipt, color-coded the entry, added the backup file, while Ashley watched me munching and humming along to whatever was playing in her AirPods. And when I was done, she clapped once. Thanks, sis, you're a lifesaver. I stood, shoulders aching, eyes burning from the screen. You're welcome, I said flatly, and then I walked out. Back in the storage room, I leaned against the shelves stacked with dusty jars and let myself breathe. This wasn't just about being tired anymore. It was something deeper, something darker. I was being erased by someone who didn't even notice. And the person handing her the eraser was my own father. Midweek came with the sharp bite of citrus under my fingernails and the familiar ache behind my eyes, the kind that signaled I'd pushed too far past the line of exhaustion. Again. I was in the back room, double-checking shipping records and wiping down the scale when the storm arrived. Everett didn't knock. The door slammed open so hard the clipboard on the wall jumped. He marched in with a file clutched in one hand and a face already reddened with fury. Dana. I turned, half covered in lemon pulp, hair shoved under a bandana, heart already bracing. He slapped the file down on the work table. What the hell is this? I glanced at the file numbers, inventory totals, margins. The spreadsheet I had cleaned up, twice. He jabbed a finger at the second page. Strawberry totals are off, shipment cost doesn't match the ledger, and we're missing case receipts from Monday. We can't afford your laziness, Dana. I blinked. And for a second I thought I misheard him. Excuse me, he paced, his voice rising. This is what happens when people don't take the business seriously, when they're too busy chasing their little hobbies to notice we're bleeding money. I felt the heat rise up my spine. You mean Ashley's mistake, the one I stayed up until 2 a.m. fixing? He whirled. Don't put this on her. I'm not, I snapped, unable to hold it in this time. But I've logged every shipment, hers and mine. I've reconciled vendor invoices. I've corrected mislabeled inventory. And when your brand new production manager forgot to refrigerate the peach batch, I was the one who stayed to reprocess the entire line. His jaw clenched. So you're saying this is all Ashley's fault? I'm saying I've been covering for her since you handed her my job, I said, breath tight. And now you're blaming me for errors I cleaned up while you were sleeping. The silence that followed should have been a moment of realization. It wasn't. Everett just exhaled and shook his head. You always make everything harder than it has to be. Something inside me cracked. I make it harder, I repeated. He picked up the file again, fixed the numbers, and don't let this happen again. And just like that, he walked out. Left me standing there. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a slammed door and a lingering scent of his aftershave and disappointment. I stared at the place where he'd stood. Then I whispered to no one, this is because I dared to dream. Not because I failed, not because I was careless, but because I stopped being silent, because I reached beyond the borders of what he allowed. I sank into the creaky office chair and let my forehead rest against my hands. It wasn't just about jam, it never had been, it was about control. And the moment I started believing I could build something on my own, he decided that was a threat. He didn't even see it. Didn't see me. Just the old boxes. The traditions. The daughter who would never leave if he just pushed her down hard enough. But he had no idea what was coming. Not yet. It was almost 9 p.m. when I finally made it home, hands sticky back tight, heart still knotted from what Everett had said. Micah was already out on the porch, legs stretched out, 2 mugs of mint tea beside him, and a cardboard box filled with blank labels on the small table between us. I didn't have to ask, he'd already printed a new batch of sparrow berry stickers. He was cutting them out with that old pair of scissors I kept meaning to replace. I sank into the chair beside him, letting the wooden slats take my weight. The air was cool, heavy with honeysuckle and the distant hum of crickets. I pressed the warm mug to my forehead and closed my eyes. He didn't speak right away, just passed me a stack of labels and a smile. We folded in silence for a while, cut, peel, smooth, repeat. The soft snap of labels against glass was oddly soothing. I got screamed at today, I said after a few minutes. Micah didn't look surprised. Let me guess, Everett, I nodded, glancing up at the dark trees beyond the fence. Said I was sloppy, said we were bleeding money, all because Ashley didn't log a shipment and I stayed up fixing it. Micah's jaw tightened. And let me guess, he didn't want to hear that part. He didn't want to hear any part. He just wanted someone to blame. I picked up another jar and pressed the label carefully on the glass. Micah, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, I admitted. The double life, the 2 jobs, pretending to be okay while I build something at midnight just to feel like I matter. He didn't rush to fix it. He never did. Instead, he set his scissors down, leaned forward on his elbows, and looked at me. Then what if you don't keep it up? I frowned. You mean quit? I mean, he leaned back again. What if we go all in? Full-time Sparrowberry, you me the kitchen, we've already got more orders than jars and Nancy wants to restock next week. 2 more shops emailed, they want samples, and one of them asked if we'd ever considered a fall flavor line. I blinked. They did, he nodded. Apparently the hibiscus cherry got mentioned in a hidden gems thread online. People are asking where to get it. My stomach fluttered, but not with fear, it was something else. Something I hadn't let myself feel in weeks, possibility. But if I leave the factory, I said slowly, we lose the steady income. Micah nodded. And we gain back your soul. I looked at him, then down at the label in my hand. My name written in curling script across the jar. A little sparrow perched above a berry branch. It didn't look like much, but it looked like mine. What if it fails? I whispered. Micah reached over and covered my hand with his. Then it fails. But it fails on your terms. And I'd rather stand next to you in failure than watch you shrink in someone else's version of success. My eyes burned, but I smiled through it. That was poetic. I've been folding labels all day, he grinned. Gives a man time to think. I laughed just a little, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than my chest, somewhere that still believed I was allowed to laugh. I looked at the line of jars on the porch rail, catching moonlight like tiny lanterns. They weren't just jam, they were my voice. And someone had finally heard it. I said, carefully placing a finished jar in the box beside us. I'm almost ready. Micah passed me another label. Good, because I'm already all in. The next morning, I didn't wear my apron. I didn't clip my name badge to my shirt or pack my lunch in the same stained canvas tote I'd carried for 5 years. I didn't even braid my hair. I let it fall, wild and unbothered, the way I used to wear it in college, before the business, before the hierarchy of family turned into a leash. I had printed the letter just before dawn. Simple, direct. 2 sentences that weighed more than everything I had ever carried in this place. Effective immediately, I resign from Whitlow Jam & Co. I will not be returning. The envelope was in my coat pocket, warm from the heat of my palm. I parked behind the loading dock like always, nodded at Ray, the delivery guy, on my way in, and took the side stairs up to my father's office, ignoring the ache in my legs and my chest. He was there. Of course he was, sitting behind the cluttered desk that had once been my grandfather's, papers everywhere, a half-eaten granola bar on a recipe binder, the same worn mug that said Jam Boss in faded lettering. Dana, he said without looking up. We need to talk about next month's batch schedule. Ashley's already behind on the fall inventory. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. We do need to talk, I said. He finally looked up, eyes narrowing when he saw the envelope in my hand. I crossed the room slowly, laid it in the center of his desk like a clean cut, then stepped back. I'm leaving Everett. His fingers stilled. Leaving for the day? No, my voice was even, clear. Leaving the business. The silence in that room was so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. His brows lowered. Don't be ridiculous. I didn't answer. You can't just walk out, he snapped, sitting upright. You're the only one who knows the prep ratios, you handle the vendor accounts. You train the staff, who's going to train Ashley? I let the question hang in the air like smoke, then I met his eyes. She can figure it out herself. He stared at me, unblinking. You've got a responsibility to this family, he said, the old line worn and sharp. No, I said. I had a role, not a voice. Not a say, just a function to fill. You're being emotional. I'm being honest. He stood up now, towering like he used to when I was 17 and still begging to make my own blueberry cardamom blend. You're throwing this all away because of some hobby, I laughed low, bitter. The hobby that outsold your last 3 seasonal batches in 1 week, he blinked. You didn't even notice I stopped promoting your jam in town, I continued. You didn't ask why I've been working late. Who Nancy from Waynesville is. You were too busy watching Ashley scroll TikTok on your dime. Everett opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. I'm not here to fight, I said quietly. I'm just done letting this place define what I'm worth. I could feel it then, the shift, not just in the air but in me, that invisible weight I'd worn for so long finally slipping off. He sat back down slowly, as if realizing I meant every word. I needed you here, he said, almost like a confession. I nodded. And I needed you to see me, you didn't. I turned before he could answer, walked out of that cluttered office without looking back, walked down the stairs, out the side door, into the sunlight. Micah was already waiting in the truck, engine running, sunglasses on, one hand resting casually on the wheel. Well, he asked. I slid into the seat, letting the door close behind me like the final page of a chapter. I'm free, I said. Let's go make jam. The next morning felt different. There was no alarm clock shouting at me before dawn. No ash-gray apron to slip over my head. No clipboard with Everett's scrawled notes demanding more while noticing less. Just the sound of Micah humming off-key in the kitchen and the scent of something new simmering on the stove. Apricot, basil, lemon zest. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, still in Micah's oversized flannel shirt, and found him bent over the pot, spoon in hand, expression fully serious. This is it, he said, not even glancing back. This one's bold, sharp, summery. It tastes like leaving something behind. I chuckled as I grabbed 2 spoons. You giving all the jam flavors emotional backstories now, he turned and grinned. Hey, if we're branding, we need depth. We both dipped our spoons into the thick golden jam and tasted it together. The apricot hit first, bright, ripe, sun-warmed, followed by the peppery surprise of fresh basil. I let it melt on my tongue, my eyes closing involuntarily. Micah was right, it tasted like freedom. I think this might be my favorite yet, I whispered, setting the spoon down gently like it was made of glass. He raised his spoon toward mine. To new flavors, I clinked against his, to fresh starts. We toasted with jam, no champagne needed. Micah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking at me like he had something serious to ask. So, he said, what's next? I glanced around the kitchen, which now looked more like a lab than a place for meals. Dozens of jars lined the windowsill, all cooling slowly. Labeled crates stood near the door, ready to deliver to Nancy and two other stores who'd just confirmed reorders. What's next? I repeated, chewing the thought like a flavor not yet fully formed. Holiday gift boxes, maybe. People love a little surprise in a ribbon-tied box. Micah nodded approvingly. Yes. I can already picture the labels Sparrow Winter Flight. I smiled. Also, a website. I've been sketching layouts. If we want to grow, we need to reach beyond Waynesville and Asheville. Online orders. He raised his brows. You thinking national? Eventually, I shrugged. Maybe even subscription boxes. One new jam each month, a flavor, a story, like a journey in a jar. Micah grinned. You're not playing anymore. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm building. He walked over, rested his hands on my waist, pulled me in close. It's wild, you know, how quickly it turned. 2 weeks ago you were staying up late to fix your sister's spreadsheets. Now you've got retailers chasing you. I still feel like I'm holding it all together with bobby pins, I admitted. But for the first time I'm holding my own work, not theirs. We stood there, quiet, arms around each other while the jam thickened behind us. The kitchen was warm, bright with possibility. No one dismissing me. No one telling me to shrink. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew the chapter with my family wasn't fully closed. Everett had been too quiet, Ashley hadn't even texted, and I knew them both well enough to recognize silence not as peace but as a storm gathering shape. They hadn't seen what was coming, not yet, but they would. When the magazine article hit. When Sparrowberry was no longer a whisper on small-town shelves but a name with traction. They'd know what they threw away. And when that day came, I'd be ready with basil apricot jars packed in neat little boxes, a logo I built myself, and a voice they could no longer ignore. But for now, I kissed Micah's cheek, turned back to the pot, and stirred the jam just once more. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 3 months later, everything had changed. The kitchen I rented now smelled like purpose. A humming, industrial space nestled behind a restored textile mill on the edge of Asheville's River Arts District. It was all tile and stainless steel, and giant steel kettles that hissed and glowed like something out of a dream. My dream. Every counter was lined with activity, 2 assistants pouring fresh batches of holiday pear rosemary into warm jars, Micah packing outgoing orders in crisp brown boxes with tissue paper and hand-pen notes. I stood at the window, looking down at a fresh delivery of basil from the farm we'd partnered with last month. My apron was smudged with apricot, but I didn't care. On the corner of the prep table, the newest copy of Carolina Table Quarterly lay open, folded neatly to page 22. Sweet Rebellion. How one woman's tiny jam brand is shaking up the South's food scene. There was a photo of me beside it. Hair tucked into a blue bandana, a wooden spoon mid-stir, a wide grin on my face. Not posed. Real. They'd captured it during the interview when I laughed, really laughed about our first batch boiling over and ruining my best stock pot. Nancy had cried when she read it. This isn't just a win for you, she'd said. It's a win for every woman who got told no and still made something delicious out of it. I was halfway through labeling a crate when the knock came. Micah opened the door first. I heard the shift in his voice before I saw the figure. Dana, he said carefully. You have a visitor. I turned and there he was, Everett, standing in the doorway looking older than I remembered. Shoulders slightly slumped, a weathered cap in his hands. His boots were dusty and for once his voice didn't fill the room, it barely even reached me. Hi, Dad. He looked around, eyes grazing the kettles, the busy hands, the printed labels, the tower of shipments stacked near the door. You're doing good, he said. Real good, I nodded. We are. He stepped further in, his gaze lingering on a row of finished jars, plum vanilla peach thyme the Sparrowberry original. He picked one up, read the label, then gently set it down like it might shatter in his hands. We're not doing so well, he said finally. I stayed quiet. Ashley, he went on, not meeting my eyes, couldn't keep up, missed deadlines. Orders came in wrong. One batch spoiled because she mislabeled the sugar mix. We lost 2 accounts. Still, I waited. She means well, he added softly. But she wasn't ready. I folded the towel in my hands once, then again. You said she had instincts. Everett winced. I was wrong. Micah stepped away to give us space. I wished he didn't, but I knew I had to face this part alone. Everett's voice cracked slightly. I came to ask if you'd consider coming back. The words dropped between us like something sour. You want me to fix it, I said, arms crossed. I want you back where you belong. That was the moment I really looked at him, and saw not the man who raised me but the one who dismissed me, over and over. Who refused to taste the jam I poured my heart into. Who handed my title to someone else, then had the nerve to ask me to train her. I took a slow breath. You want me back, but not the ideas, not the voice, just the labor. That's not true. It is, I said. Because when I needed you to believe in me, to see me, you didn't show up. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I let the silence answer for me. After a long moment, he nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to the floor. I just thought family sticks together. Family doesn't ask you to disappear to earn your place. I stepped past him and opened the door wide. He looked at me then and for once really saw me. Not the obedient daughter, not the workhorse, but the woman who walked away and built something beautiful without him. You have a good thing here, he said quietly. Oh? And then he stepped out into the afternoon sun and was gone. I shut the door gently, turned around and found Micah watching from the kitchen. You okay? He asked. I nodded. No tears. No, I said. I think I cried them all into the first batch. We smiled and I picked up the next jar. Sparrowberry wasn't just jam anymore. It was a line in the sand. 1 year later, I stood behind a wooden booth painted robin's egg blue, under a striped canvas tent fluttering in the breeze. The Saturday farmers' market was alive with chatter. Kids running with kettle corn, couples sipping fresh-pressed cider, neighbors catching up between rows of local cheese and handmade soaps. And there I was, nestled between a woman selling wildflower bouquets and a beekeeper with jars of amber honey. A chalkboard above my booth read in careful cursive, Sparrowberry Preserves, crafted by Dana. Below it, rows of glass jars caught the morning light, pear rosemary, peach thyme, apricot basil, and of course, the original cherry hibiscus. Each label bore my handwriting. Each recipe came from my hands. Each flavor carried a piece of the woman I had become. I handed a jar to a woman in a corduroy hat while her toddler clutched the edge of the table, wide-eyed. This one's got a little heat at the end, I warned gently. But it's the kind that makes you smile. I like spice, the little girl declared proudly. I smiled. Then you've got good taste. She tasted a sample spoon and looked up at me, eyes wide. It tastes like magic. I crouched slightly so we were eye level. It tastes like being seen. Her mother laughed softly. She'll remember that. As they walked away, Micah waved at me from his table across the path, selling Sparrowberry tote bags, gift bundles, and a brand new line of teas we'd started blending last month. He was talking with 2 college students and wearing the same blue Sparrowberry cap he insisted made him look like a startup founder. I watched him for a moment, heart full. The soft ache of gratitude never quite left me. Not for the jam, though I loved it. Not for the sales, though they had grown. But for the choice. That I had chosen this. That I had built this. Not because someone finally gave me permission, but because I stopped asking. A familiar face appeared near the corner booth. Nancy, wearing a giant sun hat and holding a cup of lemonade. Girl, she said, fanning herself with one of my flyers. You've got a line down the block, I grinned. You say that like it's a problem. Oh honey, she said, tapping my sign with a red fingernail, that's what we call a homegrown empire. I glanced back at the rows of jars, each one glowing like a piece of me in glass. There'd been a time I thought success meant approval. Now I knew better. Success is peace. Success is being known, and not for what you endured, but for what you dared to create in spite of it. So I handed out more spoons, told more stories, watched people's faces light up when they tasted something that didn't just flavor their tongue but reached something deeper. And as the sun climbed higher over the hills of North Carolina, I looked across the market and whispered to myself, this is the life I built. Flavor by flavor, jar by jar, seen at last. And that was the end of my story. But there's something I still wonder about. When my father showed up asking for help, after everything, did he do the right thing by coming to me, or was it just too late? If you've ever had someone come back after letting you down, Tell me in the comments what you did. Did I handle it the right way? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine.